Trump has just presented a 20-point peace plan for Gaza. He believes he can finally bring peace to the Middle East. The plan has been supported by the Palestinian Authority and by Israel, as well as numerous majority Muslim countries, amongst them Turkey, Egypt, Jordan, Qatar, Saudi Arabia, and the UAE, as well as key Western players, amongst them the UK, France, and Italy. My name is Stefan Thompson. I'm the founder of Visegrad24, and in today's episode, we're going to go point by point through the plan to find out what is on the table and analyze it and find out if it's even a viable plan. Let's go. Point number one, Gaza will be a de-radicalized terror-free zone that does not pose a threat to its neighbors. This is an absolutely crucial point for Israel because it means that Hamas cannot and won't be allowed to retain power in Gaza were this peace plan to go through. Hamas will have to be disarmed. Now, the issue of de-radicalization is a really interesting one because what that means is we can't have another organization like Hamas take Hamas's place, but also it means a massive overhaul of the educational system in Gaza. We've seen shocking videos of UNRWA-funded school camps of training little children to become terrorists. We have the cult of shaheeds in Gaza, and we have a glorification of violence and of killing Jews. This will have to massively change. I don't know how feasible this actually is. I don't know how ingrained radicalism is in Gazan civil society. Point number two. Gaza will be redeveloped for the benefit of the people of Gaza who have suffered more than enough. This is an incredibly important point because the people of Gaza have clearly massively suffered. There's been death, there's been destruction, cities have been turned to rubble. And this is obviously because Hamas has refused to surrender the hostages, has refused to engage with Israel in any meaningful way for the last 2 years. They have perpetuated this conflict and they have used their own population, the poor Gazans, as bargaining chips, and they've used them as a PR tool to turn the Western world against Israel. But the rebuilding of Gaza is a crucial point. Now, if we can have a wealthy population in Gaza, rich people, wealthy people, a prosperous civil society, the odds of peace drastically increase. So that is a point that both Israel and Gaza should clearly support. The question is who should pay for this redevelopment? Someone is going to have to cough up vast amounts of money to raise Gaza from the rubble. Now, as a poll, I know that it is possible to rebuild a city. Warsaw was destroyed 85 to 95% after the Warsaw Uprising in 1944. It's a phoenix city. It's come back from the ashes. It can be done. The expectation is that Gulf states, wealthy Gulf states such as the UAE, who have been a large supporter and large supplier of aid to the population of Gaza, that these countries will lead these efforts. There's also talk of European countries paying for the redevelopment of Gaza. As a European, I strongly oppose this because why should Europeans be involved in this conflict that is fundamentally not a European conflict? This is an Israeli conflict, a Middle Eastern conflict, a Hamas conflict. Hamas, cannot be said enough, is responsible for the suffering, for the death, and for the destruction. And it should be them, really, who pay the price, but I don't believe they have the money to redevelop Gaza, so someone else will have to pay. Point number three. If both sides agree to this proposal, the war will immediately end. Israeli forces will withdraw to the agreed-upon line to prepare for a hostage release. During this time, all military operations, including aerial and artillery bombardment, will be suspended, and battle lines will remain frozen until conditions are met for the complete staged withdrawal. An immediate ceasefire will make it possible to see whether Hamas is actually willing to follow the provisions of the peace deal or not. The line which Israel will have to withdraw to in the first stage isn't far away from where they currently are, meaning that they won't have to give up territory that they have fought hard for and that the IDF could resume offensive operations if Hamas fails to release the hostages as promised. Now, the one issue with this is that Hamas is known for, in fact, the Palestinians are known for, being presented with great deals and then not taking them. So let's see if they even accept this offer. Point number four. Within 72 hours of Israel publicly accepting this agreement, all hostages, alive and deceased, will be returned. Now, this is probably the most important point to Israeli civil society. All hostages would be released together, fulfilling one of Israel's most important war aims. This is why they've been fighting this war. The short 72-hour deadline is important as it won't allow Hamas to stall the process. If the hostages aren't returned, the war will simply swiftly continue. Point number five. Once all hostages are released, Israel will release 250 life sentence prisoners plus 1,700 Gazans who were detained after October 7th, 2023, including all women and children detained in that context. For every Israeli hostage whose remains are released, Israel will release the remains of 15 deceased Gazans. This point is a difficult one for Israel because it's not really a very fair deal, but this is not unprecedented in any way, shape or form. When the Israeli soldier Gilad Shalit was kidnapped in 2006 and released in 2011 after negotiations, Israel was forced to release more than 1,000 Palestinian prisoners in exchange for one Israeli, for Gilad. And around 250 of those prisoners had been sentenced to life for serious crimes. One of them was actually Yahya Sinwar, who later became the leader of Hamas and who was successfully eliminated by the Israelis last year. Israel has already released around 2,000 Palestinian prisoners, of which around 350 had life sentences, in the ceasefire deals that saw 129 Israeli and foreign Hamas hostages released in January and February of this year. So this is clearly a point that the Israelis will accept. Point number 6. Once all hostages are returned, Hamas members who commit to peaceful coexistence and to decommission their weapons will be given amnesty. Members of Hamas who wish to leave Gaza will be provided safe passage to receiving countries. This is probably the most difficult point in the peace deal. Hamas is an Islamist terrorist organization. It is unlikely to commit to peaceful coexistence, and it is unlikely to give up political power in Gaza. It could turn out that Hamas will refuse this point and that the war will simply continue. And it will continue until Hamas is completely eradicated from Gaza and holds no territory at all. Again, as a European, I want to point out that I hope to God that no European countries will provide safe passage and grant residency to former Hamas fighters who choose peace. They should absolutely not be let into Europe. I think this is a really important point for us Europeans in this deal. Point number 7. Upon acceptance of this agreement, full aid will be immediately sent into the Gaza Strip. At a minimum, aid quantities will be consistent with what was included in the January 19, 2025 agreement regarding humanitarian aid, including rehabilitation of infrastructure, water, electricity, sewage, rehabilitation of hospitals and bakeries, and entry of necessary equipment to remove rubble and open roads. Now, this point is important. It would help to quickly alleviate the suffering of Gazan civilians, and it's not a controversial point at all, really. It will, however, still be difficult to reach all corners of Gaza with aid immediately. There's still many parts of the Gaza Strip where explosive materials are buried, streets are booby-trapped, and buildings are at risk of collapse at any moment. So just rehabilitating basic water, electricity, and sewage infrastructure will take many months. This is really important because no one wants to see Gazan civilians who are caught in the crossfire suffer. Point number 8. Entry of distribution and aid in the Gaza Strip will proceed without interference from the two parties through the United Nations and its agencies and the Red Crescent, in addition to other international institutions not associated with in any manner with either party. Opening the Rafah crossing in both directions will be subject to the same mechanism implemented under the January 19th, 2025 agreement. This is an interesting point because the UN has so far been completely unable to efficiently distribute aid in the Gaza Strip. We've seen this. That's why the Gaza Humanitarian Foundation was created, and that's why it was using private contractors to secure the defense of the aid distribution, because the UN has completely and utterly failed. But it'll be very interesting to see if the UN can uphold this part of the deal. So it will be interesting to see whether that will change after a ceasefire. I don't necessarily think so, but we shall see. Now, the other issue is the issue of Egypt and how it will handle the Rafah crossing. Cairo has previously signaled that it doesn't want large population transfers. I mean, there's a massive border wall for a reason, and it's unwilling to take in hundreds of thousands of Gazans leaving the Strip for Egypt. So it'll be interesting to see if that border is reopened or if that massive border separating the Gaza Strip and Egypt will remain, and whether it will remain closed. This is important context because Hamas is an offshoot of the Muslim Brotherhood, which was created in 1928. It's an Islamist organization, and it came to power in Egypt in 2011. And then it had its president, Mohamed Morsi, toppled by the army following popular protests in 2013. The Egyptians don't want Brotherhood supporting Hamas members and followers to move to Egypt because they fear destabilization in Cairo, and especially in the Sinai Peninsula, which borders Gaza, and where an Islamist ISIS and Al-Qaeda insurgency plagued the barren peninsula between 2011 and January of 2023. The Egyptians really don't want any new trouble there after years of heavy fighting, so this provision of the Gaza peace plan is a really interesting one. Let's see where it goes. Point number 9. Gaza will be governed under the temporary transitional governance of a technocratic, apolitical Palestinian committee responsible for delivering the day-to-day running of public services and municipalities for the people in Gaza. This committee will be made up of qualified Palestinians and international experts with oversight and supervision by a new international transitional body, the Board of Peace, which will be headed and chaired by President Trump, with other members and heads of state to be announced, including former Prime Minister Tony Blair. This body will set the framework and handle the funding for the redevelopment of Gaza until such a time as the Palestinian Authority has completed its reform program as outlined in various proposals, including President Trump's peace plan in 2020 and the Saudi-French proposal, and can securely and effectively take back control of Gaza. This body will call on best international standards to create modern and efficient governance that serves the people of Gaza and is conducive to attracting investment. This is another point of the peace deal that will be very challenging. The first question is whether the people in Gaza, including any remaining elements of Hamas, would tolerate the rule of the temporary technocratic Palestinian Committee. This is unlikely, knowing the history of Hamas that hasn't had elections since it took power in the Gaza Strip. The oversight of the Board of Peace chaired by President Trump does ultimately mean that the US president would have temporary power over Gaza, and this after chants in the Gaza Strip about the US being the great Satan. The second point is the question of reform of the Palestinian Authority. For years, the PA has been making promises to leave militancy behind, but has so far refused, for instance, to end its Pay for Slay program, which rewards terrorists and their families for killing Israeli civilians. Speaking at the UN just days ago, Netanyahu said that the Palestinian Authority has refused to change its ways, and he had previously made statements about the Palestinian Authority not being allowed to take power in Gaza.
But, that I hear from the Western leaders. They tell me, the PA promised us it will reform. And I know this time, Prime Minister, it will be different. Yeah, right. We've heard these promises for decades. They always promise. They never deliver.
It's also worth noticing that the Palestinian Authority isn't a democratic body. It hasn't held elections for nearly 20 years. Its president, Mahmoud Abbas, was elected for a 4-year term in 2005, and he is still in power 20 years later. He will turn 90 years old in a month and is highly disliked by Palestinians in Gaza and the West Bank alike. If elections were to be held in the West Bank today, every credible opinion poll has Hamas as the winner. So how can Palestinian self-rule and a two-state solution be accepted by Israel if they are almost certain to elect Hamas or a similar successor group as their government? I think another important point of this point of the plan is the element of Tony Blair. Now, I wouldn't wish Tony Blair on my worst enemies, and I certainly don't wish him on the Palestinians. We will see how that will turn out. Point number 10. A Trump economic development plan to rebuild and energize Gaza will be created by convening a panel of experts who have helped birth some of the thriving modern miracle cities in the Middle East. Many thoughtful investment proposals and exciting development ideas have been crafted by well-meaning international groups and will be considered to synthesize the security and governance frameworks to attract and facilitate these investments that will create jobs, opportunity, and hope for future Gaza. Now, almost the entire world has heard about Trump and his comments about Gaza being beachfront prime real estate. And he has certainly been very praiseful of Gulf states, especially the UAE and their modern cities, Abu Dhabi, Dubai, and their economic miracles. He and others hope their success can be repeated in Gaza. But a territory is its population, and the Gazans, unfortunately, perhaps aren't Emiratis. So this point, in my opinion, is complete and utter wishful thinking. Although, obviously, we wish the population in Gaza all the best, because their prosperity is the only real way forward for peace, unfortunately. Point 11. A special economic zone will be established with preferred tariff and access rates to be negotiated with participating countries. Seems like a pretty sensible point. Point number 12. No one will be forced to leave Gaza, and those who wish to leave will be free to do so and free to return. We will encourage people to stay and offer them the opportunity to build a better Gaza. The reconstruction of Gaza will take years, probably decades, and life there will be incredibly difficult for the foreseeable future. How many people will want to leave and how many people want to stay? It's hard to say. We saw what happened in Syria, millions left. And the other question is, which countries will they be allowed to leave for, and how will they be received there? The crucial part for us Westerners is that they are not allowed to move to Europe, to North America. We've had enough terrorism here in Europe. We've had enough Islamism. We've had enough crime associated with mass immigration from the Middle East. These people must stay in the Middle East, which is their home and their historical home. Point number 13. Hamas and other factions agree to not have any role in the governance of Gaza directly, indirectly, or in any form. All military, terror, and defensive infrastructure, including tunnels and weapon production facilities, will be destroyed and not rebuilt. There will be a process of demilitarization of Gaza under the supervision of independent monitors, which will include placing weapons permanently beyond use through an agreed process of decommissioning and supported by an internationally funded buyback and reintegration program, all verified by the independent monitors. New Gaza will be fully committed to building a prosperous economy and to peaceful coexistence with their neighbors. The demilitarization of the Gaza Strip will also take time, especially considering how many of the tunnels are still intact and how extensive the tunnel network is. For comparison, it's the size of the London or the Paris metro in total. This point rests on the question of whether Hamas will actually agree on not having any role in the governance of Gaza in the future. It remains to be seen whether they will actually accept it. Hard to say. Point 14. A guarantee will be provided by regional partners to ensure that Hamas and the factions comply with their obligations and that new Gaza poses no threat to its neighbors or its people. This is a point which is similar to the security guarantee discussion surrounding the peace deal discussions about the Russia-Ukraine war. What guarantees can regional partners actually provide? Are Qatari or Saudi troops expected to go to war against Hamas if it turns out that Hamas stops complying with its obligations and starts posing a threat against Israel again? Who knows? Hard to say what this point actually is. Point 15. The United States will work with Arab and international partners to develop a temporary International Stabilization Force, ISF, to immediately deploy in Gaza. The ISF will train and provide support to vetted Palestinian police forces in Gaza and will consult with Jordan and Egypt, who have extensive experience in this field. This force will be the long-term internal security solution. The ISF will work with Israel and Egypt to help secure border areas along with newly trained Palestinian police forces. It is critical to prevent munitions from entering Gaza and to facilitate the rapid and secure flow of goods to rebuild and revitalize Gaza. A deconfliction mechanism will be agreed upon by the parties. The composition of this ISF force is one of the great unknowns of the peace proposal. Which countries are the soldiers to come from? Is it to be the long-term internal security solution? Just how many years does long-term mean in this case? Are they supposed to be responsible for disarming Hamas and dealing with any rogue Hamas elements? There's many questions about this ISF force. Point 16. Israel will not occupy or annex Gaza. As the ISF establishes control and stability, the IDF will withdraw based on standards, milestones, and timeframes linked to demilitarization that will be agreed upon between the IDF, ISF, the guarantors, and the United States, with the objective of a secure Gaza that no longer poses a threat to Israel, Egypt, or its citizens. Practically, the IDF will progressively hand over the Gaza territory it occupies to the ISF, according to an agreement they will make with the Transitional Authority until they are withdrawn completely from Gaza, save for a security perimeter presence that will remain until Gaza is properly secure from any resurgent terror threat. Well, that point was a real mouthful. The time frame of this agreement will be interesting. Just how quickly is the IDF supposed to leave? How long will it take to set up a credible ISF force? It's likely to take many months at a minimum, and for now it seems like the IDF is there to stay in Gaza, really. Point 17. In the event Hamas delays or rejects this proposal, the above, including the scaled-up aid operation, will proceed in the terror-free areas handed over from the IDF to the ISF. The point suggests that an ISF force will be created even in the event of Hamas refusing the peace deal. Maybe they can be used to police Gaza once the IDF has full control of the Gaza Strip and has practically eradicated Hamas. Which countries are likely to provide soldiers for the ISF in such a scenario? That all remains very unclear. Point 18. An interfaith dialogue process will be established based on the values of tolerance and peaceful coexistence to try and change mindsets and narratives of Palestinians and Israelis by emphasizing the benefits that can be derived from peace. So the religious de-radicalization of Gaza will be difficult after nearly 20 years under the control of an Islamist terrorist organization. The task will be much more difficult than the denazification of Germany after 1945, for instance. So we'll see how that goes. Point 19. While Gaza redevelopment advances and when the Palestinian Authority reform program is faithfully carried out, the conditions may finally be in place for a credible pathway to Palestinian self-determination and statehood, which we recognize as the aspiration of the Palestinian people. Now, what if the Palestinians say no in democratic elections to the Palestinian Authority and votes in Hamas or a similar party? Can the Palestinian Authority even be reformed? These are all important questions and crucial questions to Israelis. Israeli civil society broadly rejects a two-state solution, doesn't want it. After October 7th, all talk of a two-state solution has essentially collapsed in Israel. So it'll be very interesting to see how Israelis react to this point in the plan. And point 20, the United States will establish a dialogue between Israel and the Palestinians to agree on a political horizon for peaceful and prosperous coexistence. We've finally gone through all 20 points. I mean, to this final point, all one can say is good luck. So many people have tried before and failed, including Bill Clinton most recently. His comments, by the way, about his mediation of talks between the Israelis and the Palestinians are absolutely staggering. He came out, here's a little clip of Bill Clinton talking about his experience in those mediations.
I killed myself to give the Palestinians a state. I had a deal they turned down that would have given them all of Gaza, all of Gaza, between 96 and 97% of the West Bank, compensating land in Israel.
Now, if Bill Clinton failed this miserably, I don't think that Donald Trump, no matter how good a negotiator he is, will succeed. These 20 points in total are all very interesting. They all sound great on paper. The difficulty is that fundamentally we're dealing with two populations who are completely at odds with each other. After the brutal war, the Israelis are exhausted, tired, absolutely enraged at October 7th, absolutely enraged at the response in numerous majority Muslim countries, as well as in Western countries where we saw massive support for the Palestinian cause. The Palestinians obviously claim genocide, they claim starvation, they claim war crimes. They are enraged and absolutely furious at Israel for the destruction of Gaza. So all in all, it's going to be very interesting to see how this pans out. The war has to come to an end. It does feel that way. But truly, the preconditions of it are the hostages and the destruction of Hamas. I don't see how Israelis can move forward with Hamas still existing and with their hostages not returned.